Recompete pilot programs office hours. Today is the second set of office hours that we're doing in the lead up to the deadline. We will be holding one more session of office hours on October 4th from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. And I welcome you to attend those, even though it's one day before the deadline. Our plan today is to just go through a few reminders as we head into the final 2 weeks before the deadline, and then to leave most of the time here for your questions. We want to answer all of your questions. If we don't get to them today, though, we will be sure to answer them if you just reach out to us at recompete@eda.gov. With that, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, excellent. Can one of my colleagues just confirm that you're seeing my screen?
Hey, Leo, we can hear you and see you.
You can see the screen, Rachel?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you. So we sent out this newsletter yesterday, I believe, with some real important tips for folks in the final 2 weeks before the deadline. If you haven't subscribed to the Recompete newsletter already, please be sure to do so. We send some really important information out through that channel. But right now, I'm just going to take you through those reminders and welcome any questions about them. So the first thing that, of course, that you all need to know is that the deadline is October 5th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There will be no exceptions when it comes to this deadline, and we really encourage you to try to submit your application 1 to 2 days before the deadline, if not a week before the deadline, just to make sure that everything goes smoothly. As always, we will be available pretty much 24/7 in the lead up to the deadline. So if you're having technical difficulties, if you're not sure that you submitted correctly, just reach out. We are here for you in that final stretch. We know that submitting a federal grant can be difficult, complicated, confusing. We know our systems aren't always cooperative, so we're here for you in the lead up to the deadline. On a similar note, we really need you, if you haven't already created an account in our Edge system, which is our grant portal, create an account in Edge today. We did a webinar on how to sign up for Edge previously, which you can find on our website, but it's very important that you create an account in Edge sooner rather than later so that you can successfully submit your materials. As a reminder, lead applicants need to have their organization's UEI, which is the Unique Entity ID, and their tax ID number in order to create an account. If you don't have this information, make sure you get it. And if you're having any technical difficulties with signing up for Edge, you can reach out to recompete@eda.gov. And please also CC our Edge hotline email, granthgsupport@eda.gov, and they'll be happy to help you as well. Great. So our second reminder, this is especially important for Recompete plan applicants, but it's relevant to all. We have published an eligible entity type template. We really need you to verify that your organization is one of the entities that is eligible based on the statute for this program. So we know for strategy development applicants what your entity type is based on the SF424 form that you're going to submit, but Recompete plan applicants do not submit the SF424, and so we do need you to self-identify your entity type using this template. So there's a link here that you can also find this template on our homepage. It's a very simple template that you can use to just make sure that your entity type is confirmed when we go into our review process. So please, please, please take advantage of that template and upload it with your application. Moving to number 3. So I talked about this a lot during the last office hours session. We have updated our eligible area and service area template based on user feedback. and we encourage you to use this template when you are submitting your geography. We can help you fill out this template. So if you're having trouble with it or you're confused about it, just reach out. We're happy to help. But we also, as I said, talked about this last time. So if you want to click on this link and view our most recent office hours, we provided a tutorial on the template. Now, just want to remind you all that in order to qualify for this program, you need to be within an eligible area according to the statute, and you should use our Recompete mapping tool in order to identify eligible areas. And if you need any help confirming whether your geography is eligible or not, just reach out to us. We're happy to help. Moving on to number 4. Everyone needs to assign an authorized representative in EDGE if they want to successfully submit their application. This comes up a lot with applicants at the last minute. EDGE will not let you click submit until you assign an authorized representative. So please make sure to go into your application today and assign an authorized representative. Only that authorized representative will be able to submit the application at the end of the day. So make sure you do that. Again, we have done a tutorial on how to add an authorized representative in the past, and you can access our slides and a recording of that tutorial through these links. Number 5, you should all take a minute, even if you've read it a few times, to reread the Notice of Funding Opportunity and the Frequently Asked Questions. Remember, the Notice of Funding Opportunity includes the rubric criteria that will be used to judge the merits of your application. So please go into that Notice of Funding and look closely at those rubric criteria and ask yourself, how would I score according to these rubric criteria? We really want you to make sure your application speaks to the NOFO. That frequently asked questions are also very detailed and provide some really critical information. So if you haven't read every single FAQ, please make sure you go in there and take a look at those FAQs today. Again, both of these links are available through this newsletter, but they're also right at our website, eda.gov/recompete. And number 6, please utilize the application checklist. So we've published a checklist that you can use in the lead up to your submission. This lists everything that you need to include with your application. So just tick through that application checklist, make sure that you've done everything you need to do so that when you hit submit, you're confident that you have included all the files that we need in order to move you forward in this process. And then finally, this is a very important reminder. I'm sure many folks know this, but if you want to be eligible for implementation funding in this program, meaning the Phase 2 implementation awards, you must apply right now for Recompete plan approval. No one who applies for strategy development grant but fails to apply for Recompete plan approval will be eligible during this round to apply for implementation funds. So you must apply for Recompete plan approval, and of course you must receive approval in order to compete in Phase 2 for implementation funds. So please make sure you submit an application for both strategy development and Recompete plan approval, or just Recompete plan approval, if you want to compete for those Phase 2 funds. And then finally, real quick, I already mentioned this, but we will be holding one more office hour session in 2 Wednesdays from now, October 4th from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we will turn to the question and answer portion of these office hours. So let me go into the chat now and see what types of questions have come in. Rachel, I actually think that on the CD 511, the award number should be left blank because you don't have an award yet. So just feel free to leave that field blank on the CD 511 with regard to Stephanie's question. Jim's question here, we we are submitting both applications. Will the review team be reading both applications? I'm just going to voice over what Rachel put there because it's really important. Please don't assume that the review team will read both of your applications together. Um, these are being treated separately and independently. So you need to assume that your strategy development application will be read by one set of reviewers, and your recompete plan approval application will be read by another set of reviewers. It's possible that there's overlap, but there's no guarantee. These really will be independent processes. Let's keep going here. Yeah, so if you're not getting an answer to your question that you sent to the Edge help desk, just shoot that email over to recompete@eda.gov and we'll get on top of it. So thanks for flagging that. Looking through these questions, please describe what should go in a recompete plan budget. So Rachel has a great answer here, but we really want you to provide a high level budget for your recompete plan. We don't want you to get too hung up on the dollar amount. That can change someday if you're selected for phase 2. What we're really trying to understand is what are you planning on funding through this program? What exactly would your investments look like? What are your ideas about the types of projects you would do in order to achieve the goals of the program? Keep going through here.
Leo, if you don't mind, I'm seeing a bunch of questions around like what does it mean if we're a partially eligible area? Do you want to speak to that?
Yes. So this is a question that we've received a lot. I'm actually going to share my screen just to talk about this question. So give me a second to pull up the map. Okay, Rachel, can you see my screen?
Yep.
So, as you all know, there are two types of eligible areas for this program: a local labor market, or actually, there are local labor market, a local community, or tribal areas, or a Pacific Ocean territory. Local labor markets are orange on the map, and then local communities are either dark blue, meaning they're fully eligible, or light blue, meaning they are partially eligible. Here's an example. Where's a partially eligible? Why aren't you cooperating with me? Sometimes you have to click around a bit. Let me zoom in. Okay, so for example, here we go. Bernalillo County, apologies if I mispronounce it to any of my New Mexican colleagues, is partially eligible. So what this means is that the county as a whole does not meet the criteria for eligibility. So the prime age employment rate must be too high, or the local wage, median wages might be too high. So the whole county is not eligible. However, within this county, there are areas with very low employment rates and low wages. So what we need to do is we need to go to our census tract viewer, which you can reach through this link, to see which areas within the county meet the criteria. So what you need to do is you copy and paste that link, and then you can check which census tracts meet the criteria by going to our census tract viewer right here. So I'm just going to put that county in right here. And then as you can see, there are some tracks that are eligible and other tracks that are ineligible. So why don't I just click on one of these tracks? The tracks that are eligible are going to be marked in pink or green, and the ineligible area will be light blue. So I'm just going to click on this tract right here. This is tract 35001940602. The employment rate in this area is 59.13, which means there's an employment rate gap of 19.26. For local communities, the gap must be 5% or higher, so it meets the criteria there. And the median income is 31,111, which is less than the requirement of 75,000. So this tract is eligible. If I look at this tract, the gap is 16, the median income is 47,000 and change, and so this tract is eligible as well. So if I were applying as this county, what I would do is I would apply with these tracts as my eligible area. So what you would do is you would list out the tracts that are eligible in the county. You can use the tract ID as the name of the tracts. And then, of course, you don't have to target your investments at all the tracts. You can choose where to target your investments within this set of tracts. So maybe all of your investments are going to go to this part of the county because you've recognized that a lot of the need in terms of employment services are concentrated in this one census tract. That's perfectly fine. You would just have to identify this as your service area. But if you are identifying a partially eligible community, make sure to identify the 5 or more tracts that are eligible. But what we really need you to do is identify that tract that is eligible as your service area, or multiple tracts. Rachel, anything you would add to this note?
No, I think that you covered it. Thanks, Leopold. I know there's a related question around, okay, if we are applying to be serving a partially eligible local community, how should we be thinking about using the Excel tool that you mentioned earlier? So could you just speak quickly to that too?
Yes. Let me just pull up the Excel tool. These are great questions. Keep them coming. Just a moment, pulling up the tool now.
And maybe while you're pulling up the tool, I guess I did have something to add actually. So sorry, everyone. As Leopold said at the top, if you guys have questions about how to navigate the map and all of these tools, please just email us at recompete@eda.gov and we can do the same kind of walkthrough with you all one-on-one, right? We know it's a complicated process, so happy to do that as well.
Thanks, Rachel. Can you see this, Rachel?
Looks good.
Yeah, so if you are filling out our Excel tool and you are in a partially eligible community, what you're going to do is fill in each row with one of the eligible tracks. So here we have a partially eligible community in Massachusetts, Suffolk County. And so for each tract that's eligible, we have filled out a row. So the first tract that's eligible is listed here. The second tract, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7 tracts were filled out, so 7 rows. Now, within those tracts, you might determine that your service area is the entirety of that tract, or you might even say it's a portion of that tract. So you need to be clear within the tract whether your service area encompasses that entire tract or if there's a subset of that area that is your service area. Now, remember, you are free to provide further context of on what your service area is in your project narrative. But here we really encourage you to use these examples and try to mimic them to the extent possible. So just to recap, we want you to list out all of the tracts that you've identified as eligible, and then the service area within those tracts that you will be targeting through this investment. Service area might mirror the exact eligible area you've identified, or it might be a subgeography within that eligible area. Rachel, anything you would add to that one?
That's good.
Yeah, and once again, we are here to help. If you send us a spreadsheet and you say, hey, did I do this right? We're happy to comment on that. That is technical assistance that we are happy to provide. All right,
Leopold,
more questions?
Leopold, I just wanted to highlight that there are quite a few questions about what is eligible or not eligible for projects. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, so the Recompete program is incredibly flexible as an economic development program. We are able to fund a variety of construction and non-construction projects as long as they are tailored to reduce the prime age employment gap in the eligible area that you've identified. For example, some communities might propose a set of workforce training initiatives in order to help get folks connected to jobs that are available nearby, while others might engage in more traditional economic development activities in order to spur business creation and job creation in the area. We have published an illustrative guide that provides examples of the types of investments that you might make through this program. This is just meant to provide examples. It's not a restrictive list of investments. If you want to see that list, definitely go to recompete.gov and scroll down to our resources tab. You can find that PDF. But on the topic of ineligibility, a few things. First of all, this is a federal grant program, so it's always helpful to take a look at the 2 CFR 200 guide to grant making, and you can take a look at EDA's website to get a sense of the types of projects that we've funded in the past. But as I said, this program is flexible and can go beyond, perhaps some of the projects that EDA has funded in the past. So definitely feel free to propose projects that are a bit more outside the bounds of perhaps what you've seen in the past from EDA. One thing that we have spoken about in the past that is ineligible under this program is the construction of housing. So EDA is not permitting these funds to be used towards the construction of housing. We are, however, allowing funds to be put towards housing activities that don't involve actually building housing. So, for example, some might propose providing housing vouchers to folks who are going through a training program. So, let's say I have to travel and spend a month in another place in order to get this workforce training. You might give me a month-long housing voucher in order to housing during that time. Another ineligible activity under this NOFO is a revolving loan program. So as many of you might know, EDA has funded RLFs in the past, but we are not permitted to do so under this program. So those are two high-level ineligible activities that I just wanted to note. But the headline here is that this is a very flexible program, and we want to get your best ideas on the sets of projects that together would reduce the prime age employment gap and raise wages in your eligible area. Rachel or Abby, anything you would add to that?
Yep, that sounds great.
Great. Rachel, Abby, any other questions that are coming up?
I think it would be helpful, Leo, if you can talk about what are the eligible entities to receive funding eventually in phase 2 versus what do we mean when we talk about coalitions in the NOFO? There seems to be some confusion on how folks might think about those two things and where do they matter?
So the entity that will receive funding in phase 1 is the entity that applies for a strategy development grant. So this is the lead applicant. And it's very important to understand that the lead applicant for a recompete plan should be the eventual applicant who you would intend to put forward for phase 2 implementation. Now, it is very possible that when you put forward a proposal for phase 2, you'll have entities in your coalition that are going to be the leads on individual projects and thus the recipient of funds. More on this will be available when we release the phase 2 NOFO. But for now, what I would say is you should all focus on who will be the recipient of funds if you receive a strategy development grant. That organization needs to be the lead, and it needs to be one of our eligible entities. And who would be the lead on a recompete plan implementation proposal? That entity needs to be the lead on any recompete plan approval application. Now, just a note on this topic of coalitions. We at this phase really welcome you to have one lead applicant in EDGE and then identify your coalition through your letters of support. That's one way to show us like who's in your coalition, who's leading on this project, who's at the table. Another option is you could just in EDGE form a coalition and identify the partner that way. But even if you do that in EDGE, we really want you to make it clear in your application who are the leading partners, who's at the table, who's committing to this work. That's really what's important at this stage. Rachel, anything you would add to that?
No, I think that's right. And I think that it's a good question, and thanks for answering, Leopold. I think the only thing is if you are applying for phase 2 funding, so you're hoping to apply at this stage for a recompete plan approval, and then you're selected as one of the at least 20 finalists to move on. I just double click on what Leopold said at the top, which is you should apply thinking that your current lead applicant will be also the coalition lead in phase 2. There may be some edge cases where things change, right? And if that were to be the case, you'd have to work with the program office, prove those changes in advance of the phase 2 application. But for all intents and purposes at this stage, if you're aiming to get to phase 2, please just assume that it will be the same kind of coalition lead in phase 2 if you are the lead applicant right now.
100%. Angie asked, should elected officials of a local government sign letters of support, or can staff do so? It's okay if someone else other than the actual elected official signs the letter of support, but make sure the person who signs can credibly attest to the commitment that's being made. This is a question we've been getting a lot. Will the impending government shutdown have any effect on the Recompete pilot program? Yes, as my colleague said, in the event of a government shutdown, we are sticking to the same deadline, so please submit your application by October 5th, and there won't be any exceptions to the deadline, so please make sure to do so. This is a great question. Is there a CSV file made available for census tracts that are eligible rather than zooming in and out of the mapping tool? My colleague Rachel posted a link. We have a Excel with all of the census level data. So please just go ahead and go to eda.gov/recompete to get that data.
I see a few questions about just, is this our only chance to apply for implementation funding? Just to speak quickly to that, so the funding that we have for this program is dependent on appropriations that we get from Congress. EDA currently has $200 million in appropriations for Recompete, and we intend on allocating all 200 over the course of this round of the competition. So we would highly encourage, if you are at all interested in applying for and receiving implementation funding through this year's competition, submitting a Recompete plan application at this phase. Again, it's all dependent on appropriations, so if we were to get more, those would be put towards additional funds, but that's a current unknown for us.
Going through these questions. Thank you for these amazing questions. So glad to see the enthusiasm for the program. I'm going through here. Verification on coalition partners. Great question. So yeah, some of you might have partners who are not eligible entities for funds. That's certainly fine. For example, we really do expect you to have employers as partners on this work. As long as they are not applying to receive funds from EDA, they can be identified as partners in your coalition. Another nice question, how many support letters are needed? There is no minimum or maximum when it comes to support letters. Something we've tried to emphasize throughout this program is that quality is more important than quantity. We want the letters of support to really show us that you have outside partners who are committed to implementing the vision that you put in your narrative. When looking at a submission, how should we factor employment as outcome for strategy grant? What number of employed should the plan use to design for? Is there a relationship between salary for future jobs for the cost of design? So there's no magic number when it comes to how many people we expect you to employ. It really is unique to your region, right? Some regions are going to have higher costs to connect people to jobs or to create jobs. Some populations are going to require more expensive supports. What we want you to do is to give us a really good estimate of what type of impact our funds could have on employment and wages in your community if your strategy is implemented and successful. So what I would encourage you to do is to just be very clear about what your strategy is, the investments you will make, and your expected outcomes. Why you think those outcomes are reasonable given the conditions in your. Is there a page or word limit for a recompete plan? Yes, you need to make sure to keep it to 8 pages maximum. Is there a way to print out the application in its entirety? Shoot us an email. We're happy to help you. You can print out the notice of funding, but all of the application materials need to be submitted electronically. But happy to discuss offline if there are any ways we can help you here. Another question here, can the period of performance or the budget period for a phase 1 strategy development grant be less than 1 year? Yes. The 18 to 36 month guideline in the NOFO is just guidance. Certainly it could be less than 1 year, but we would have to approve that on a case-by-case basis. Just make clear why you are proposing the period that you are. This is an interesting question from Nathan. Is it to our advantage to partner with another county with similar economic challenges? Would that increase our chances of being funded? So you are allowed to partner with a nearby county. You are allowed to just focus on your own county. You are allowed to focus on a service area within that county with a high level of distress. What we want is for you to pursue a targeted geographic approach, whatever that means to you, where the funding you are requested would have a meaningful impact on employment and wages. So if you partner with a bunch of nearby counties, just think about whether you can make a clear case, look at the rubric criteria in the NOFO that you have a targeted geographic approach. The whole theory of change of this program is that within these eligible areas, we need to pursue a place-based approach, right? Every eligible area is different, and we really want to target these funds in a way that makes sense in these eligible areas. So I am not saying that you can't partner with another county or multiple counties. Just make it clear why you have pursued a targeted geographic approach in your application.
And can I just add one more thing to that, Leo? I think keeping in mind the context too that we've said average awards will be somewhere around $20 million for local communities and $50 million for local labor markets, right? So it's not to say we won't award below that range or above that range, but again, keeping in mind that Leopold mentioned as well as the goals of the program.
Thanks for that question, Nathan. Megan asked, how long do we have to track deliverables post-award? So the performance monitor, but I will say that the strategy development grants are expected to run for 18 to 36 months, and the implementation grants are expected to run up to 5 years. But as I said, the performance monitoring requirements will be further developed as the program progresses. Great question from Eric. What documentation is required to demonstrate that a nonprofit as lead applicant is acting in cooperation with the officials of a political subdivision? We really need to just see a letter from the state or local government that they support your application. So for example, if I am a nonprofit based in the Bronx and I'm applying for Recompete, I could get a letter of support from the New York City government saying that they support this application. If you have any questions about letters of support, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to answer on a case-by-case basis to help you figure out how to make sure that you've checked that box. Nora, thank you for the question about Edge. So Edge is our new platform that we are using for grant submissions across EDA. We launched it earlier this year, and it is supposed to be similar to your experience, similar forms to what you would be completing on grants.gov, just a different user experience. If you're having trouble with Edge, we really do encourage you to watch our application basics webinar, which takes you through Edge step by step. And also, please reach out, and we're happy to help you with Edge. We do not want Edge to cause anyone to have trouble submitting their application on time. We're here for you. We want to help you. Just reach out. Janie, thanks for this question about SAM.gov. Can we sign up for Edge before our SAM is approved? You do need a UEI in order to sign up for Edge, so that doesn't mean you have to get all the way through to a cage number, but you do need to get your UEI from SAM in order to sign up for Edge. If you're having issues with this, I know the deadline's fast approaching. Shoot us an email. We should be able to figure something out, but yeah, that's the distinction. Is there any reason to believe strategy development grants are less competitive? Thanks for that question, April, and Rachel, thanks for the response. Just want to voice over, no. We believe that strategy development grants are critical capacity building grants, and we who apply for recompete plan approval or those who apply for both. Remember, these are two separate applications and they'll be judged independently. So we really want to encourage folks to pursue both opportunities. They are both critical investments in communities. Thanks for the question, April. Moving on to Benita. We are a national network that serves many geographic areas. Do we need to choose one particular area to apply? Every single applicant needs to identify the area or areas that they will serve with these investments if they are awarded funds. You are allowed to choose multiple areas. That is allowed. But as Rachel sent me a repeat, targeted geographic approach is an eligibility, is a rubric criteria that you'll be judged on. So just think about that as you choose your area. What level of detail do we need for the sub-recipient budgets in the budget narrative? Should they include breakdowns of expenses? Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't need that level of detail at this time for sub-recipients. We just need an estimate of the overall sub-recipient cost. Is that right?
That's correct. And I assume the question is coming on strategy development grants, right? So if that's the case, yeah, Leo, exactly. So we should just require how much you're allocating to either contractual or subrecipient costs. And then if the question was about recompete plan approval, we have a budget template out for that online as well, but that should be even more high level, as Leopold mentioned earlier.
Please don't stress saying, I can't submit this if I don't know every single dollar how it will be spent with my subawardees. You should be able to just give us a high level estimate for subaward. Is it possible to get a replay recording of this session? Absolutely. We will post a recording to the website in the next couple of days. And there's also a recording of our office hours from 2 weeks ago on the website already. So please feel free to watch that. Someone asked, is this going to be a reimbursement grant? What about capital expenses? Many organizations, nonprofits may not have the capacity to fund that up front. Rachel said it well. We haven't released an official determination on this, but we absolutely recognize that organizations might not have the capacity to fund things up front, and we're working on offering both advance and reimbursement options for these grants. Can funds be used for commercial construction if we demonstrate the effect on improving or increasing jobs in the target range? Paul, great question. I would need a little more detail on the proposed construction. We do allow a variety of construction projects that should be used to, stimulate business activity in the region. So I guess I would just need the actual project proposal in order to better understand what you're proposing here. Nora said, we usually add a table of contents so that the reviewer can see what our total app looks like. Will this create problems with the page limits? No, you can submit a table of content as a supplemental file, but when you submit your 8-page narrative or your 5-page narrative, you should just submit the narrative on its own so that you guarantee that every page is read, but feel free to submit a table of contents as a supplemental file. Something I've found extremely helpful in the past is if you submit a PDF with your letters of commitment, having an appendix or a table of contents at the front so that I understand this section is the letters of commitment from employers, this section is letters of commitment from government entities, etc. That's very helpful. Can program funding cover distressed areas across multiple states? Our consortium includes multiple rural southern states. Again, this is going to be dependent on your region. Maybe it makes sense to combine multiple counties, given the population size and your strategy. We really defer to you, but as a reminder, targeted geographic approach is a rubric criteria, so please read that carefully as you think about your proposal. What if an outside area is surrounded by areas that are eligible? A place in Alabama we'd like to include in the coalition has lost funding for a local police force, but is not deemed eligible on the map. So we were pretty constrained by the geographic eligibility requirements. They were provided to us by Congress. So any investments through this program must be directed to an eligible geographic area according to the map. Looking through here. Again, it's a 5-year estimate on period of performance for phase 2 implementation projects, but this could range. But 5 is a really good baseline for you to use. This is a nice question from Anne. If our local government entity is putting in their own application, can they still support our submission? Yes, absolutely. There's nothing stopping an entity that's applying from also being part of the leadership of another coalition, putting in a letter of support. Nothing stopping you from doing that. We are a university and we seek to serve entrepreneurs in the community, which helps them start a small business. Often they are nonprofits. Is that eligible? Absolutely. Small business entrepreneur supports are certainly eligible through this program. And yes, Rachel reminds me that universities are usually eligible for this program as long as they are a public entity, not a private entity. If awarded, can funds be used to support tribal projects? 100%. EDA is very committed to working with tribal communities, so absolutely we can use funds to support tribal projects. Can recompete funds be used to provide entrepreneur seed funding to support job creation? Funds so my point earlier about revolving loan fund is probably relevant here. We're not going to be providing seed funding or loans directly to businesses through this program. Rachel, is that how you would answer the question? Just want to double check.
It is, and we'll send something out if we find a workaround. But for now, let's assume no. The other statutory constraint is we can't fund private. This funding can't go to private entities or individuals by statute. So I think it would preclude us from providing seed capital to entrepreneurs as much as we would like to.
Thanks for that question. Would EDA be potentially interested in funding a program that helps retiring business owners plan for succession and supports them selling their businesses to their workers, creating employee-owned businesses, and building community wealth? Clancy, thanks for that question. I can't really comment on what's competitive versus what's not, but that certainly would be eligible. You just need to make a very clear case that your investment projects would collectively raise primary employment and wages in your eligible area. So you just need to make a clear case that my 3 to 8 projects that I'm proposing are going to address the conditions, the unique conditions in this area, and achieve the goals of the program. So that's what I would say, Clancy. Just really look at that rubric criteria, make sure that you are making a clear connection between your proposal and what we've put in that section of the NOFA.
Can I just say one more? It reminded me of one more overarching comment. I think as we begin to kind of parse out activities and entities that are eligible and are not, one thing I'd recommend for folks on this line is also just in general reaching out to your local economic development representative here at EDA. For folks who are near to EDA, these are our on-the-ground staff. They're experts in economic development and our full kind of stack of funding that we're able to provide at this bureau. And so please, we'd encourage you to apply for Recompete, of course, where it makes sense. And then for other ideas that you may have that you're looking for funding for, they'll be your first point of contact to be able to figure out, are there other opportunities that make sense here at the Bureau or beyond too?
Thanks, Rachel. Just to double down on that point, if you go to eda.gov/about/contact, you'll be able to find your economic development representative. So we have representatives for all 50 states and territories as well. So let's say I want to reach my EDR in Colorado. All I have to do is click on Colorado and it will load the information. And I just have to reach out to Trent. His email is listed, and the EDRs will be sure to get back to you. If you want, you could CC recompete at eda.gov as well in these emails. But just want to show you this interactive map, super helpful resource for you to identify your economic development representative. All right, going to go through the questions.
I see a few, including Marcia's, about areas that aren't currently shown as eligible on the map, but there may be a case for them to be economically distressed and they'd like to apply. I just double click on Leo, what I think you mentioned earlier, which is one, we are statutorily constrained to fund regions that meet the threshold that is shown on the map. So a level of prime age employment trailing the national average, and then in some places median household income that is below the $75,000 threshold. That being said, we've also written into the NOFO that if you are an area that doesn't show up as eligible on the map, you are still welcome to apply if you're able to provide proxy data that meets those thresholds. So if that's a route that you'd like to pursue, please, we'd encourage you to reach out to our inbox, recompete@eda.gov, and we can provide more information about the type of data that would be required to be submitted in addition to your application if you're not showing up as eligible on the map. But want to highlight that as an option for folks that are curious as to, hey, want to apply, not showing up for a path forward.
Absolutely. Seeing another question here from Renee. Our jurisdiction is currently in bankruptcy. How can we demonstrate sufficient capacity to rebuild, in part with the support of EDA funds? Should we emphasize regional partnership? Great question, Renee. I think that this program is for communities that are distressed, communities that are experiencing bankruptcy, are certainly eligible. I think what we're looking for is that exactly what you said, that the lead applicant has capacity, and this can be shown not just through doing it alone, but also through your partnerships. We also want you to utilize the strategy development funds as an opportunity to build that capacity. We think of these funds as a pretty flexible capacity building grant, and so we would encourage a jurisdiction like yours to apply for that opportunity as well. Is a screenshot of the eligibility mapping tool acceptable, or is the template required also? Eric, you are free to take a screenshot. If you find the template to be too overwhelming, take a screenshot of your eligible area. However, we highly encourage folks to use the template. It's helpful to us as we're collecting data and doing the analysis, but if you want to take a screenshot, you will not be disqualified as long as you have identified a eligible area very clearly. We also would encourage you in that case in your narrative to be clear about whether the service area that you plan to work with is the entire eligible area that you've identified or a subset geography of that eligible area. So someone asked about whether funds can be used to purchase buildings. Yes, funds could be used to acquire land, but would have to follow the 2 CFR 200 guidelines when it comes to that type of activity. So if you have more specific questions about that, feel free to reach out through the inbox. This is a great question about coalition members. So if there are members of the coalition that are only partially eligible or not in the eligible area, should the entity that is in the eligible area apply as a single applicant? So this is an important moment where we can discuss the difference between eligible entities and eligible geographies. Your eligible entities do not need to be headquartered within an eligible area to serve that eligible area. So let's take an example. There might be a nonprofit that's based 2 counties over from the eligible county. They have a long history of doing activities in this eligible county and can show that they have a meaningful connection to the community. That entity is free to apply for this program. On a similar note, you might have a nonprofit within the eligible county that wants to bring in partners from outside the eligible county. For example, perhaps they want to bring in an employer that's near the eligible county. That's certainly allowed. So I just want to emphasize that when it comes to eligible geographies, that's about where you target the investment, right? The whole theory here is that there are persistent places with persistently low prime age employment rates and low wages. We want to use these funds to help folks who live in those areas. That doesn't mean that the implementing entity needs to be directly headquartered in that area. One more note on that. As always, equity is our number one investment priority, and part of that means showing evidence that you've meaningfully involved and engaged the communities you intend to serve. So this is especially important to think about if you're an applying organization that is not based in the community you are going to invest in. You really do want to see evidence from all applicants that communities within and populations within the service area have been engaged and involved in the development, implementation, and outcomes to your proposal.
Leo, I think Phil Shackelford had a good question that I just want to highlight. There's a question around, in a planning grant application, is it possible to fund private industry leaders to develop criteria for training, assess training needs, barriers to training to create an industry-supported plan? So, Leo, I don't know if you want to talk about like both, is that permissible, but also the role that private sector should be playing in this competition writ large.
Yeah, so Rachel, you answered it really well here. The funding itself cannot go directly to industry itself, right? These funds are not eligible to go directly to industry, but we certainly encourage you to use these funds to do exactly what you've described. That's certainly allowed, right? Develop, assess training needs. That would really align with the workforce development principles at the Department of Commerce. We want you to partner with industry to meet their needs and ensure that if you train folks, that they'll get hired into jobs. So I would say, while the funds themselves can't go to industry, we really want to see evidence that you've brought industry to the table, that you're partnering works of these training efforts or other efforts see results. Since this project is place-based, does this mean that the job seekers, residents, and potential employers need to be in the eligible areas? So yeah, we do want you job seekers in the eligible area when it comes to the goal of the program is to raise prime age employment in these eligible areas, right? So yes, we do want you to target job seekers in the eligible area. That doesn't mean that the employers need to be in the eligible area. So for example, you might have an area where the employment rate is very low, but there's in a nearby ineligible area, and you're going to do a training program to help connect folks in the eligible area to that employer. So that's the distinction I would make, Tricia. Thanks for that question. Lindsay has a great question here. NOFO says 5 to 8 projects are required. Can you speak to what a project is? We are an HEI, so all our projects are related to tracks of education within this trades. So the NOFO actually says 3 to 8 projects are required, and I think it's really helpful to go on EDA's website and to look at just some examples of the types of projects we fund to get a sense of what an individual project might look like. But just to give you an example, you might see a proposal where one project is simply funding the governance of your coalition, making sure that all partners are at the table, ensuring that underserved communities are brought into the governance of the implementation of the program. A second project might be building a facility. Maybe it's a worker training facility. Maybe it's a business support facility, something like that. And then the third project might have to do something with conducting activities in that facility or otherwise. So I think the best way to think about this is that EDA traditionally funds projects independently, But here we're funding a group of projects together, given the large funding amount that's available here, and we can fund multiple projects together that collectively achieve the strategy you've laid out in your proposal. Hope that was helpful. Happy to answer any follow-up questions. I know it can be a little bit confusing.
I think one question I think it would be good to highlight, Leo, can you just talk about how we will consider applicants that are involved in other major federal initiatives? So, for example, would tying this
I think I missed the end of your question, Rachel, but if you are involved in other major federal initiatives, we just want to see that you have the capacity to take this on. But there's really no preference shown to an entity that is involved in another federal grant program or one that has never had a federal grant. We're going to judge everyone the same way using the rubric criteria that you see in the NOFO. Quentin, as it pertains to industry sectors, are there any preferences as to the type of opportunities we should look to help provide access to, i.e. healthcare versus advanced manufacturing? Would this primarily be focused on labor market data to support the greater economic mobility benefit of either option? This is a great question. It really depends on the region. We want you to put forward your best proposal to raise wages. This program is not just about getting people into jobs, but getting people into good jobs and good career pathways. We know for different communities, but we do want to see you work your hardest to use these funds to stimulate wage gains for folks in your community. So I know that's a pretty broad answer, but it really is dependent on the conditions in your region. Yep, recompete.gov is not a website. Sorry, Anthony. eda.gov/recompete is the website.
but we wish it was.
Abby in the chat. Recompete.gov, I'm still working on getting the URL. Can participants on this call be emailed the Q&A questions and EDA responses after the session and for previous sessions? David, I can certainly email you the recording. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to email a transcript of all.
Leopold, maybe it was just my internet. You cut out for the back part of that, but if I can just add, David, another good resource is FAQs on our EDA website where we've been tracking. You'll see there's like 60 of them now, but common questions that come up in these sessions, excuse me, and things that just like we know trips people up. So maybe I can drop the link in the response to your comment, but we'd encourage you to check out there, and then we'll also update those if there's a common question that came up today that we should be tracking.
What is the timeline for the phase 2 NOFO and the application deadline? So we don't know what the phase 2 NOFO's deadline will be, but I will say that we've committed to releasing the phase 2 NOFO this winter. And the plan is to release it at the same time that we announce phase 1 winners. So the deadline for phase 1 is October 5th. As a reminder, October 5th. Then we're going to have to get into our review period. And then later in the winter, we will announce strategy development winners and those who have eligible for phase 2 by receiving recompete plan approval. At the same time, we will release our phase 2 NOFO. Great question. Does recompete plan approval require match? Matching dollars are not required for this program. We recognize that many communities are a struggle to come up with match, and so you are not required to identify match. Matching dollars and other forms of leverage will be considered as a competitive factor in phase 2, but so will other complementary projects or initiatives or commitments. So at a high level, they're required for this program. Um, if you see any inconsistencies on our map, on our spreadsheet, can you just reach out to us and be a little more specific about the inconsistency spotting, and we're happy to correct the issue if there is one. Thanks for that question, Angie. Is the lead agency the agency the money goes to directly? Yes. And the lead applicant is the recipient of funds. So please be aware of that. How can we leave award number blank on CD 511 if it's a required field? You can just write NA, given that you don't have an award yet. That's why I said leave it blank, and then you would update it with your award number if you were given an award. Taylor said, I thought I heard you say that your organization had to be within the service area. What if we are a statewide nonprofit? What if we are a statewide nonprofit applying for strategy development for a specific region, but our office is not located? Just to repeat, you do not need to be physically located in the service area to apply. You just need to target your investments that you propose at that service area that's eligible.
I'm seeing a few more questions maybe on, like impact per dollar ratios, how much folks should be sizing in their budgets. I would just say on strategy development grants, please provide the most accurate budget estimate that you can. That's one of the evaluation criteria, right? So strategy development grants, we do expect a pretty comprehensive budget. For recompete plan applications, again, these are the ones that get you to phase two. We are really just expecting a high level budget estimate. So those numbers that you put for us in this phase will be evaluated and assessed. But then for those that move on to phase two for implementation grant applications, we will ask for an updated budget that's a bit more in detail than what you're kind of submitting at this stage. So just would encourage folks as you prioritize your time in these last 2 weeks, don't get too hung up on the exact budget dollars for recompete plan applications, since we will kind of revisit for those that move forward to the next round.
I'm realizing we missed a question asked by Lakira at 4:15 p.m. Thanks for flagging that. What would be the content of a recompete plan approval if we're also applying for strategy development? So remember, we are not going to evaluate these together. They will be evaluated separately. So there might be content in your recompete plan application that you would repeat or perhaps duplicate in some way in a strategy development application. However, the best advice I can give you is to look at the notice of funding opportunity and look at the rubric criteria that we're going to be using for a strategy development proposal versus a recompete plan. So a strategy development proposal is really going to be judged on the 4 criteria in the row, and it's really about, is this a good proposal to raise the capacity of your region to pursue activities that would raise prime age employment? So this is a capacity building grant and it will be judged as such. Whereas recompete plan approval is, do you have a really good idea of the types of investments that could be made, tens of millions of dollars to raise prime age employment and wages in your community? So they're 2 different grants. They are related, they are connected, but the content should be really specific to those types of topics. I hope that is helpful at a high level. But really, reading the NOFO is where you're going to get your best information about what you should be putting in those narratives. Okay, these questions are amazing. Thank you. We're about 13 minutes over right now, so I'm going to have to cut this off soon, but let me just try to get to a few more here. What's the range for strategy development? We're encouraging folks to request between $250,000 or $500,000. $250,000 to $500,000. How detailed do letters of support need to be? Great question, Stephanie. I would say as detailed as you need in order to ensure that we know that the commitment is there for the long haul. So the commitment is clear what that entity is bringing to the table. So I really encourage you to make a determination of put yourself in the shoes of someone who's reading your application. Are they able to read that letter of support and really clearly understand how this entity is involved in the proposal and what they're bringing to the table? Is it allowable to submit extra attachments? Yes, you can submit extra attachments. However, there's no guarantee that any additional attachments are going to be reviewed. So if you want a guarantee that a reviewer will look at something, you need to put it in your required documents. So,
or put another way, we will be super firm with our reviewers and ask them to only read the first 5 pages if you're a strategy development grant, or the first 8 pages if you're a recompete plan narrative application. So I just know folks will spend a lot of time on attachments. Please feel free to include them if you'd like, but we will be pretty strict on this with our reviewers.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, the narrative is what you got to focus on. That's what's going to be read. That's what's going to determine your score according to the rubric, in addition to other required documents such as letters of support, etc. It's hard for tribes to compete with larger metro areas in terms of showing impact, yet this program can create major impacts in a smaller community. How does your review process take this into account? We certainly recognize that different communities are going to have different conditions, right? So some communities are going to have a real high level of distress or struggle to, have the capacity to implement certain types of projects versus other projects. We just want you to make it clear in your proposal how this would show impact. Maybe it's over a longer period of time. Maybe it's a different approach than a city might take. But we want this program to be accessible to tribal areas, to rural areas, to smaller areas. And so we're going to take into account the unique conditions that your community faces when we're reading your application. Rachel, anything you would add there?
No, I think you covered it, and I just want to echo that, it's a point very well taken on our end, and I think we understand and are actively working on points to understand, relative impact, not just impact in a vacuum.
Okay, I'm just going to take one more question here. This is a good one. Can we apply to phase 2 in the fall, even if we know now that we are going to apply to it and only apply for phase 1 now? So this is one to end on. If you want to apply for phase 2 later this year, you must apply for phase 1 now. And the only way to apply for phase 2 in the fall is to apply for a recompete plan approval during phase 1 now. So please, if you're unsure of the process here, reach out to us. But applying for recompete plan approval and then getting recompete plan approval from EDA is the only way to become eligible to apply for phase 2 implementation later this year. So with that, I'm just going to say thank you. We really are excited to see your proposals come in a couple of weeks. We really want you to feel comfortable submitting these proposals, so reach out to us. We are checking the inbox 24/7, and we will do our best to respond quickly. But we're excited for you. We encourage you to apply for this program, and thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon.